let's talk about GPT-4 and large language models. So they are in part trained on Wikipedia content.
Yeah.
What are the pros and cons of these language models? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, the technologies move very quickly in the last 6 months and looks poised to do so for some time to come. So first things first, I mean, part of our philosophy is the open licensing, the free licensing, the idea that, this is what we're here for. We are a volunteer community and we write this encyclopedia. We give it to the world to do what you like with. You can modify it, redistribute modified versions, commercially, non-commercially. This is the licensing. So in that sense, of course, it's completely fine. Now, we do worry a bit about attribution because it is a Creative Commons attribution share-alike license.
Mm-hmm.
So attribution is important, not just because of our licensing model and things like that, but it's just proper attribution is just good intellectual practice. And so, and that's a really hard, complicated question. If I were to write something about my visit here, I might say in a blog post, I was in Austin, which is a city in Texas. I'm not going to put a source for Austin as a city in Texas. That's just general knowledge. I learned it somewhere. I can't tell you where. So you don't have to cite and reference every single thing. But, if I actually did research and I use something very heavily, it's just morally proper to give your sources. So we would like to see that. And obviously, they call it grounding. So particularly people at Google are really keen on figuring out grounding.
That's such a cool term. So ground any text that's generated, trying to ground it to the Wikipedia
or
quality
a source.
I mean, the same kind of standard of what a source means that Wikipedia uses. Mm-hmm. The same kind of source will be generated.
The same kind of thing. And of course, one of the biggest flaws in ChatGPT right now is that it just literally will make things up just to be amiable. I think it's programmed to be very hopeful and amiable, and it doesn't really know or care about the truth.
It can get bullied into it can kind of be convinced into it.
Well, but like this morning, the story I was telling earlier about comparing a football player to a Lamborghini, and I thought, is that really racial? I don't know, but I'm mulling it over, and I thought, I'm going to go to ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. So I sent to ChatGPT 4. I said, this happened in Wikipedia. Can you think of examples where a white athlete has been compared to a fast car inanimate object? And it comes back with a very plausible essay where it tells, why these analogies are common in sport, blah, blah. I said, no, could you give me some specific examples? Mm-hmm. So it gives me 3 specific examples, very plausible, correct names of athletes and contemporaries and all of that. Could have been true. Googled every single quote and none of them existed. Yeah. And so I'm like, well, that's really not good. Like I wanted to explore a thought process I was in. I thought, how do I Google? And I was like, well, it's kind of a hard thing to Google because unless somebody's written about this specific topic, it's, but I thought, it's large language model. It's processed all this data. It can probably piece that together for me, but it just can't yet. So I think, I hope that ChatGPT 5, 6, 7, 3 to 5 years, I'm hoping we'll see a much higher, level of accuracy, where when you ask a question like that, I think instead of being quite so eager to please by giving you a plausible sounding answer, it's just say, don't know.
Or maybe display how much bullshit might be in this generated text. Like, yeah. I'm really would like to make you happy right now, but I'm really stretched thin with this generation.
Well, it's one of the things I've said for a long time. So in Wikipedia, one of the great things we do may not be great for our reputation, except in a deeper sense for the long term, I think it is. But, we'll be a notice that says the neutrality of this section has been disputed, or the following section doesn't cite any sources. And I always joke, sometimes I wish the New York Times would run a banner saying the neutrality of this has been disputed. They could give us we had a big fight in the newsroom as to whether to run this or not, but we thought it's important enough to bring it to, but just be aware that not all the journalists are on board with it. That's actually interesting, and that's fine. I would trust them more for that level of transparency. So yeah, similarly, ChatGPT should say, 87% bullshit.
Well, the neutrality one is really interesting because that's basically a summary of the discussions that are going on underneath. It would be amazing if, like, I should be honest, I don't look at the talk page often. I don't. It would be nice somehow if there was a kind of a summary in this banner way of like this. Lots of wars have been fought on this here land for this here paragraph.
Well, it's really interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that because one of the things I do spend a lot of time thinking about these days, and people have found it. We're moving slowly, but we are moving. Thinking about, okay, these tools exist. Are there ways that this stuff can be useful to our community? Because a part of it is we do approach things in a non-commercial way, in a really deep sense. It's like it's been great that Wikipedia has become very popular, but really we're a community whose hobby is writing an encyclopedia. That's first. And if it's popular, great. If it's not, okay, we might have trouble paying for more servers, but it'll be fine. And so how do we help the community use these tools? What are the ways that these tools can support people? And one example I never thought about, I'm going to start playing with it, is, feed in the article and feed in the talk page and say, can you suggest some warnings in the article based on the conversations in the talk page? I think might be good at that. It might get it wrong sometimes, but again, if it's reasonably successful at doing that, and you can say, oh, actually, yeah, it does suggest, the neutrality of this has been disputed on a section that has a 7-page discussion in the back, that might be useful. Don't know. Worth playing with.
I mean, some more color to the, not neutrality, but also the amount of emotion laden in the exploration of this particular part of the topic.
Yeah.
It might actually help you look at more controversial pages, on a page on the war in Ukraine or a page on Israel and Palestine. There could be parts that everyone agrees on, and there's parts that are just like tough.
Yeah, the hard parts.
And it's hard. It would be nice to, when looking at those beautiful long articles, to know, like, all right, let me just take in some stuff where everybody agrees on.
I give an example that I haven't looked at in a long time, but I was really pleased with what I saw at the time. So the discussion was that they're building something in Israel, and for their own political reasons, one side calls it a wall, hearkening back to Berlin Wall, apartheid. The other calls it a security fence. So we can understand quite quickly, if we give it a moment's thought, like, okay, I understand why people would have this grappling over the language. Like, okay, you want to highlight the negative aspects of this, and you want to highlight the positive aspects, so you're going to try and choose a different name. And so there was this really fantastic Wikipedia discussion on the talk page. How do we word that paragraph to talk about the different naming? It's called this by Israelis, called this by Palestinians. And that, how you explain that to people could be quite charged, right? You could easily explain, oh, there's this difference, and it's because this side's good and this side's bad, and that's why there's a difference. Or you could say, actually, let's try and really stay as neutral as we can and try to explain the reasons. So you may come away from it with a concept. Oh, okay, I understand what this debate is about now.
And just the term Israel-Palestine conflict is still the title of a page at Wikipedia. But the word conflict is something that is a charged word.
Of course, yeah.
Because from the Palestinian side, or from certain sides, the word conflict doesn't accurately describe the situation, because if you see it as a genocide, one-way genocide, it's not a conflict, because to people that discuss, that challenge the word conflict, they see, conflict is when there's two equally powerful sides fighting.
Yeah. No, it's hard. And, in a number of cases, so this actually speaks to a slightly broader phenomenon, which is there are a number of cases where there is no one word that can get consensus. And in the body of an article, that's usually okay, because we can explain the whole thing. You can come away with an understanding of why each side wants to use a certain word. But there are some aspects, like the page has to have a title. So, there's that. Same thing with certain things like photos. It's like, well, there's different photos. Which one's best? A lot of different views on that. But at the end of the day, you need the lead photo, because there's one slot for a lead photo. Categories is another one. So at one point, I have no idea if it's in there today, but I don't think so. I was listed in, kind of American entrepreneurs, fine, American atheists. And I said, that doesn't feel right to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just personally, it's true. I mean, I wouldn't disagree with the objective fact of it. But when you click the category and you see sort of a lot of people who are, you might say, American atheist activists, because that's their big issue. So Madeleine Murray O'Hair or various famous people who, Richard Dawkins, who make it a big part of their public argument and persona. But that's not true of me. It's just like my private personal belief. It's not something I campaign about. So it felt weird to put me in the category, but like, what category would you put, and do you need that? In this case, I argued it doesn't need that kind of, like, that's not, I don't speak about it publicly except incidentally from time to time. I don't campaign about it. So it's weird to put me with this group of people. And that argument carried the day. I hope not just because it was me, but categories can be like that, where, you're either in the category or you're not. And sometimes it's a lot more complicated than that. And is it, again, we go back to, is it undue weight? If someone who is now prominent in public life and generally considered to be a good person was convicted of something, let's say DUI, when they were young, we normally, in normal sort of discourse, we don't think, oh, this person should be in the category of American criminals. Because you think, oh, a criminal, yeah, technically speaking, it's against the law to drive under the influence of alcohol, and you were arrested, and you spent a month in prison or whatever. But it's odd to say that's a criminal. So just as an example in this area is Mark Wahlberg, Marky Mark, is what I always think of him as, because that was his first sort of famous name, who I wouldn't think should be listed as in the category American criminal, even though he was convicted of quite a bad crime when he was a young person, but we don't think of him as a criminal. Should the entry talk about that? Yeah, that's actually an important part of his life story. That he had a very rough youth and he could have, gone down a really dark path and he turned his life around. That's actually interesting. So categories are tricky.
Especially with people, because we like to assign labels to people and to ideas somehow, and those labels stick.
Yeah.
And there's certain words that have a lot of power, like criminal, like political, left, right, center, anarchist, objectivist. What other philosophies are there? Marxist, communist, social democrat, democratic socialist, socialist. And if you add that as a category, all of a sudden it's like, oh boy, you're that guy now.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you want to be that guy.
Well, there's definitely some really charged ones, like alt-right. I think is quite a complicated and tough label. I mean, it's not a completely meaningless label, but boy, I think you really have to pause before you actually put that label on someone. Partly because now you're putting them in a group of people, some of whom are you wouldn't want to be grouped with. So it's, yeah.